Hey, what is up, Comics World? This is Splendopia, and I'm Rob Casey, and I'm here now. I haven't done a video for about 3 weeks, but it's the last day of 2018, and this is my 2018 year-end comic review. There's a lot of stuff that's gone on in 2018 regarding comic books, and this is kind of my way of like talking through my experience as a comic fan and as a comic book collector. Uh, this 2018 has kind of been ironic, I guess, in the sense that it had that I haven't collected floppies actively since I was like a teen or preteen in the early 1990s. And what I did do, what I have been doing for the last bunch of years, is collecting these things. Wait for the trade. So these are not books that I bought this year. These are books I bought, I think, the year before. These are well known. This is Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo's run on Batman. I started collecting those because of I was watching on YouTube Kevin Smith's Fat Man on Batman, and I really enjoyed those interviews with those guys, especially Greg. In particular, Greg has I'm going to pull up some comic books so I have something to look at while I'm talking about this. In particular, Greg learned his craft sort of in the classic, like, you wait outside a master's temple and he turns you away, and you continue to take his abuse and punishment until he decides that you're worthy of his tutelage. And so that happened with Larry Hama. He had a great story about that, and if you've seen my other videos, you know that I'm a big G.I. Joe Larry Hama fan. But last year, about September, there was a controversy in the G.I. Joe collecting world about a writer, Aubrey Sitterson, who, I've kind of rehashed this in other videos again, but he was, in my opinion, he was antagonizing the fans, making some character and story choices that were designed to create controversy and then elevate himself through through the resultant controversy by really like demonizing the fan base of G.I. Joe and kind of appealing to the broader comic book community at large, saying, "Oh, see, look, I'm putting all this all these like great progressive themes and ideas in my book, and all these alt-right Nazis that love their guns and their Second Amendment, bunch of conservatives who are fans of G.I. Joe. They don't like it, and they're coming after me." I think that was like a really disingenuous narrative, and it was all hitting about the same time that Diversity in Comics, the YouTube character, was being targeted by Marvel and by pros. There was a real campaign not only against him but against anybody who watched his videos or followed him on Twitter. He calls it like a night letter campaign where other pros, especially Ethan Van Sciver, started drawing the ire of the comic book community at large. And there are a lot of, I guess, there are a lot of pros who, well, let's say there's some pros that stayed out of it. There are other pros who were like actively leading the charge, who seem to take it as like their mission to bring this guy down, to destroy him. As far as I could tell, and I watched all his videos. I watched pretty much all of Diversity in Comics videos. They wanted to label him as like a bigot, again, like alt-right, which, he clearly is not either of those things, or white supremacist. That's something that people called him, which is really dangerous, especially after Charlottesville. And, that was part of the story too. He just happened to be in Virginia that day, and some people at Marvel made a big deal about how he was, supposedly a member of the KKK. All that sort of defamatory nonsense that was going on to get him deplatformed, and in a really irrational way. But what I found this year is there does seem to be like this top down initiative to get fans who are critical of these mainstream properties like demonized and labeled as like hate groups in this like totally disproportionate way. And some of that I think is due to Trump. You have this like supposition that all Trump supporters are racist, and therefore half of the people that voted in the last election, essentially, minus 3 million, are racist, and therefore there's this massive underground problem of like resurgent racism in America, and a lot of that's overblown. I don't think it's accurate. I don't think it's fair to, I don't like Trump. I don't think it's fair to demonize or label his voters in that way. So I kind of got involved in all this stuff as like a cultural and social, interested party. I went to film school, and I have a lot of free time in my life, so I'm able to follow all these Twitter exchanges and these debates, and my sense in seeing them, through my own eyes is that there's a lot of really nasty trends, a lot of anti consumer sentiment, a lot of ugliness in the comic book industry, in the comic book world. And at the end of last year, Diversity in Comics, sort of in an attempt to combat this and restore his reputation, started this thing called Move the Needle, where he was like, he's a comic book reviewer. The comic book pros were not happy about his criticism. So he's like, I'm going to make this into a positive too. If I read a book and it's the kind of book that we want, it's the kind of book that, I think fans of my channel are going to enjoy. I'm going to call it a Move the Needle book. We're going to try to get people out to the comic book stores. Comic book stores are going out of business, in part because they've got a lot of titles that the fans or the customers aren't responding positively to, and they're stuck with all this extra inventory. Let's talk up the books that we think are really good, and get people buying them. And I thought that was a great idea. I was really into it. I thought it was like a great antidote to the kind of negativity that pros like Aubrey Sitterson were pushing. At the same time, and this is like about a year ago, end of 2017, especially pros, especially like Mark Waid, were really invested in shutting down any positive initiative that Diversity in Comics would be making. And so that's kind of, what are we, 8 minutes in this video? That's kind of where we're starting with this year-end roundup. That's partly why I went and bought all these books. Because before, like I said, I was just buying these trades. And my titles were, even though when I was a comic book collector in the 90s, I guess, what I was reading back then was like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the original like Eastman and Laird run, and X-Men, like the Jim Lee stuff, and Todd McFarlane's Spider-Man, pretty much what everybody else was reading in those like boom years of the 90s. And all those comic books are back in my hometown. I'm going to try to get them all shipped down this year. Maybe we can do some more videos where I'm talking about those kind of throwback titles and what's so great about them. But speaking of great, this is X-Men Grand Design. I haven't read this one yet. I do have. I'm going to start this like year-end roundup with a bunch of titles that I didn't read yet. I pulled out, just so you know what's in this pile, this is some stuff that ended up in the box that was like kind of stuck with some of my G.I. Joe comics, which I have around. So I put them back in the box, but I tried to pull out stuff that I thought was not germane to my story about the year-end roundup. But the first couple books in this box are the ones I haven't read yet. It's what can you say? You got a bunch of stuff to catch up on. This Hawkman, I'm pretty excited about this Hawkman series. I really like what Vendetti and those guys have done to explore this character. I hear number 7 is really good. But here's another thing about this year-end roundup. I have stopped buying these floppies, and I stopped a couple of months ago because of the lawsuit against Mark Waid and so many pros coming out and supporting him, giving him money for the lawsuit against Diversity in Comics. Basically, if you don't know, I guess it was like March or May. It was spring of this 2018, he he did a crowdfunded campaign for this comic graphic novel called Jawbreakers, and he had a deal with Anarctic Press to publish it, and Mark Waid contacted Anarctic Press and got it blocked. And now there's a lawsuit for tortious interference, which he seems to be guilty of. Now, let me say, the Ragman, I collected these Ragman, but I haven't been able to get into like reading them. I hope they're good. I had the Ragman #1 from the 90s and was interested in them. Bonehead too, I bought a couple of Boneheads. And then also Cyberfrog. Cyberfrog is Ethan Van Sciver's original project, and he played a big role in comic books in 2018 too. He was a Trump voter. He was demonized a little bit for that, and also for his support of diversity in comics. I think a lot of people, when they listen to diversity in comics videos, they feel like he's diagnosing like a lot of the changes in the comic industry, a lot of the things that are not working as well in mainstream comics right now, things that they've kind of forgotten to do, like have fun, create entertainment that people are interested in. They're these sort of like half-assed art and kind of overblown progressive partisan lecturing that sort of had infested, I guess, the mainstream comic scene. And so Ethan was, depending on what account you listen to, Ethan was run out of comic books. There was a lot of social media pressure on DC. I'm going to get to this too. I bought, this is stuff I haven't read yet, although I read it when I was a kid. This is all the Deathlock stuff. So let's go back to Ethan. Ethan, he basically quit DC. He was working on Green Lantern and quit early because he was facing a lot of this internet harassment, ostensibly for being a Nazi, because he had drawn a sketchbook with Sinestro that was called My Struggle, and Sinestro sort of had a Hitler pose, and Sinestro sort of made fun of as being Space Hitler. And it was very tongue-in-cheek. I have no reason to believe, having listened to Ethan Van Sciver's YouTube channel all the rest of the year, that he is a white supremacist or Nazi or any of that stuff. But you found this is something Diversity in Comics says, the accusation is the proof. You found these accusations spread throughout social media, spread by pros who, what reason they had to go after this guy other than sort of like I said, they're like a top-down kind of edict to do so, or just like a collusion attempt to stifle criticism. It's hard to say what made people go after him. Sometimes they just went after him because he was being sort of a jerk. On social media, he was given as good as he was getting. He was being called a Nazi, or alt-right or whatever, and he would call people names back. And it led to a really destructive dynamic between the fans and comic book pros that evolved over the course of the year. So in the course of the year, as all this stuff was happening, I decided that I was going to revive an old idea that I had called Cyborg USA, and create my own comic book. So I've done that, and I hired an artist, and the book is essentially finished. The first lettering pass is done, and I'm waiting for my writing partner to get back to the States. And after the new year, we're gonna polish it up and do some supporting materials, and then it's gonna be basically ready to print. And I would like to send it out to comic publishers. I'd like to get a publishing partner and do a limited, maybe 12-issue run or less. But what I found is that my support for diversity in comics and for Ethan Van Sciver has tarred me as well. Just the act of defending them, saying, hey, this guy with diverse children, who's just critical of some negative things he sees in comics, is not a white supremacist, is not alt-right. That is enough to have me block-botted, to have me criticized and lumped in with the alt-right. Let me just add, by the way, my mom ran for state senate in Alaska. She ran twice as a Democrat, and I was a campaign manager on her campaigns in 2012 and 2016. I voted for Hillary. I kind of, you know, held my nose on it. I don't like Hillary. I don't like the Clintons, and I didn't want to vote for them. But I was unwilling to vote for Trump, who I think is like much worse. But a lot of the stuff like comes down to that. It comes down to political intolerance and guilt by association. And it's a really negative thing. So this is like kind of the last of the stuff that I haven't quite read yet. The Deathlock stuff I got. I got a big collection of Deathlock and Ghost Rider, which is in my other apartment, to kind of read up on some old titles that I really liked from back in the day, but I haven't got to those. That's why they're in the front of the box. And this is the Darth Vader trades that I picked up to collect those. And then here's Cyborg. So Cyborg, this is a great run. This is like a two-part Monkey's Paw, issue 19 and 20. One of the first things I bought when I started buying comics again this past year. And then the Cyborg series was canceled at the end. Here's some more Deathlocks that I have read through. This is like kind of fun. Thing and Deathlock and Spider-Man and Deathlock. Again, those aren't like new comics. This is just like stuff that I bought this year that wound up in the box with the Deathlock stuff. And then these are the Cyber Frogs that I have read. And then the X-Men Grand Design. So now we're getting into the stuff that was released this year. And this stuff, Ed Pisker's X-Men Grand Design was one of the best things I read this year. I really liked the art style, and I liked his attempt to digest the history of X-Men into this sort of like limited series. And then here's the Cable series that I bought. This is a pretty good run. I never really liked Cable. I was collecting when Cable was brand new, and Deadpool was brand new, and those characters like never really spoke to me the way that they've like caught on fire with a lot of other people. And then also Doomsday Clock. Now, part of the reason that I was like really excited to get back into comics this year was because of Doomsday Clock. And I've enjoyed it, but it's been a real problem. These two characters is this the mime and the marionette? That's the marionette. This has been like a pretty good series, and I didn't buy the last one. The last one is issue number 8, basically because I stopped buying comics a couple of months ago. Because of this anti-fan sentiment. Speaking of anti-fan sentiment, Donny Cates, who wrote this Venom series, which is like okay. Venom is another character that like was created when I was like heavily collecting comics, and that I'd never really was all that into. But I did buy this run because people liked it. I missed issue number 3, and I think it's fine. And then here's this is Batman's Kings of Fear. I only made it through the first 3 issues before I stopped buying. But I like this one a lot. I like the art. I like the style of this limited series. That's one that I would recommend. Brave and the Bold is another one I picked up. And so the artist on this, I guess is writing or is drawing the Green Lantern Grant Morrison series. I think I've got that right. It's like really like impressive art and really something to be admired. I found this story like a little like dense and hard to get into, and just like not like my style. Like like Irish mythology is not like my main interest. And then finally G.I. Joe. So a lot of the G.I. Joes that I bought this year are in another box where I have most of my G.I. Joe comics. These are some extra ones, and this like represents kind of the end of like the ones I bought. And this one was like a real heartbreaker. I really enjoy Larry Hama. I got this at this year's New York Comic Con. That's like I guess they call him a virgin cover of 255. And he started with one of my favorite characters, Dr. Venom. He's in this run right now, 256. That was the last one I bought before I saw that he was like really coming out from Mark Waid, like donated to Mark Waid's his legal defense fund. And I just can't condone that. This guy, you can see like my G.I. Joe fandom representing. I'm sure there are all kinds of reasons Larry is doing that. As probably like not the least of which is he's legitimately a friend of Mark Waid's. And then this is the other one that he's got out right now, Silent Option, which is started really enjoyably. Again, I only bought the first issue. I'd like to buy the rest, but it just left a bad taste in my mouth, because the way I see it is diversity in comics is like a guy. You know, he's a military veteran. He's served our country. He's a guy that made a YouTube video or a YouTube channel to make videos to criticize some bad things that he saw in comics, but also just to review comics and be a part of the comic book community. And his attempt to release Jawbreakers was totally blocked by Mark Waid. Mark Waid's dream, or Diversity in Comics' dream of publishing a comic book and having it released in comic stores, was quashed by Mark. And I don't think that's right. I don't think that's what people should be aspiring to. I don't think that's the spirit of comics. I don't think it's the idea of like going out and creating your own independent work. I think it's like I think it's opposed to the spirit of like what makes comics great, you know. And this is not a MAGA thing at all. Like I said, I'm not a Trump supporter, but this is also the $6 million G.I. Joe vs. $6 Million Man series. I bought a bunch of these, and I bought some of the original art from that series. So that's the first box. The second box, we're going to go through. These are a bunch of the True Believers ones I bought. You know, I wanted to buy, there's like a Fantastic Four omnibus that's coming out this year. I wanted to buy that. But again, like Joe Quesada, who is supported, there's this character on Twitter called Renfamous, who basically spends her days harassing like fans who are critical of the current comic book industry. And you know, there's this label Comicsgate that they use to describe these fans, like fans of Diversity in Comics or fans of Ethan Van Sciver. To some extent, people have picked up like the mantle of Comicsgate and used it as like a, you know, kind of a rallying point. But the point of like labeling them and kind of seeing all this stuff like unfold, labeling them Comicsgate, like Gamergate, is to minimize and delegitimize their criticism. And it's a really like, it's been a really negative development. But anyway, that's there we go. That's Fantastic Four, the Venom Spine. That's the first appearance. Is that the first appearance? I just read that. And then this is like one of the ones that when I get into the rest of these books, a lot of these books were recommended by Diversity in Comics for Move the Needle. I bought them because he was promoting books that he enjoyed and that he was trying to positively promote. And there you go. I've followed the series. Like the first couple were pretty good, and then they had this weird issue where, and there's True Believers Droids, where basically like Bond confronted a bunch of like homoerotic neo-Nazis and murdered them all in a sauna, which was kind of out of the spirit of James Bond and kind of more in the spirit of like what the author Les Cott seems to think of his like political, or would like to do to his like political rivals. You know, this is Star Wars: Storms of Crate. Star Wars has also had this like really negative attitude towards fans this year, and it started. You know, I saw The Last Jedi. I'm so excited to go see The Last Jedi. I enjoyed Force Awakens, you know, mildly or moderately, and I enjoyed Rogue One, and I was really excited for The Last Jedi. I was really excited to see Luke Skywalker coming back, and we all know how that turned out. You know, you may have enjoyed The Last Jedi, but I did not. When I saw it opening day in the theater, I was really, really disgusted, and it took a while for like popular sentiment to kind of catch up to me, and you know, more like fans to kind of validate my experience like in the theater. Here's Darth Vader. So I was buying all these like this year. But Lucasfilm has kind of done what Marvel has done, and again, it makes me wonder if it's not like a top down like imperative where there's been a lot of like demonizing and labeling fans who are critical of the property as it has unfolded, as like bigots, or as like alt right, or whatever they're saying, to like stifle what I think is legitimate criticism. And it's a really negative trend in entertainment. Um, it's a negative trend in like corporate entertainment, and I think what we've seen this year is like, again, like I've consumed all this stuff this year. I bought all this stuff, but what we're seeing is like fans don't want to do it. They don't want to like consume uh, entertainment that like has a negative, that is created by people that have negative attitudes towards them. And I think that's perfectly fair. I don't think it's reasonable for these companies to think that they can keep targeting fans and expect them to continue supporting the work, even though they have properties like Star Wars or Batman or Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles that are universally loved. People will take a time. Like me with GI Joe and Larry Hama. I'm going to continue to read Larry Hama. I'm going to continue to support GI Joe, but I can take a time out. I can take a time out for a year, not read his book. And then I'm also in this strange position where I've decided to create my own book, and I know that me taking that position opens me up to criticism. It opens me up to people not wanting to read my book, and I don't care for that. That's a negative cycle. And it's one that I think everybody has a responsibility, whether you're Joe Quesada or you're running like Vertigo. You have an obligation to look at what's going on at your company with clear eyes, and think about like what it will take to make a better future for your company and for the relationship that you have with the fans. So like I said, I was a big Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles fan. I accidentally bought 2 of these 20s. There's a couple books that I accidentally bought 2 of, and I read through all these this year. Kind of mixed attitude. Some of the stuff I liked in the TMNT universe and TMNT this year. Some I was not crazy about. I did like this Triceraton kind of arc with Krang. Although there were some holes in it that I wasn't crazy about. So I'm gonna keep going in this box. Here's a Versus was like one of the big move the needle books. It's like really beautifully drawn. I guess Esad Ribic. I guess I don't know if that's how you say his name, but I collected through for a period of this, and I liked it fine. Kind of had this like kind of dystopic like Running Man sort of feel to it. And again, like beautifully drawn. But you had Eric Larson running Image, and he spent a good chunk of the year just like jawing back and forth with fans, and being really rude and really cruel. And it did take the shine off buying Image stuff for me. This is like an alternate where you had Blake Northcott. And she was one of I would say like she and Brian Edward Hill were like the 2 big standouts for me as I was like following all this like drama on Twitter, and in the comic book world, where it was like both of them seemed to really have the right attitude about like what it was that the customers were asking for, and how to kind of like address those concerns without alienating the comics industry at large, but also not alienating those fans. It's a line that like Donny Cates was like running pretty well until a couple of days ago, when he got attacked for not I haven't seen Venom the movie yet, but for not shipping Eddie and the symbiote, because I guess there's like some like gay subtext in the movie. Like maybe Eddie has a really. I mean, I don't know. Is it gay if it's like is a symbiote male? I don't really get it. I don't get why that's like uh, why it's so important to. Uh, I mean, I do understand like the desire for LGBT representation and creating characters who are LGBT, um, and just the general like they're the like fostering a world of like positive tolerance and acceptance for everyone. Um, but sometimes the sex in comic books a lot of times is like more implied. Sexuality is like conveyed through characters. I guess like not entirely true because I'm thinking of like Peter Parker and Mary Jane. Like when I was reading comics in the 90s, that was a very hot, very sexy relationship. The X-Men were like always very, very, very sexy. Rogue and Gambit and Psylocke and Cyclops and Jean Grey. Um, uh, but I think in general it's like not like people don't want to be reading about the sex lives of heroes and comic book characters. They want to be reading about their heroic exploits and relationships and sex drama. Um, like I don't know. It's a lot of times it reads as just like kind of like off-putting or childish or like quote unquote forced. It's like what they talk about when they talk about forced diversity. I wanted to bring up the Weatherman because I really like this one. I only bought the first one and then I didn't read it for a while, and I kind of wanted to read more. And then this is Ice Cream Man. I bought a few of these and I read them, and I wish I had bought less. I was not crazy about that. I bought the first Stranger Things. Didn't really like. Didn't really work for me. I think I have a. This is out of order. I got these Sherlock Holmes um, books, and I was able to last through this mystery for about 3 issues before, like it was just dragging way too slowly, and I just lost interest. And then also there's Frank Miller, this series. This series I thought was like pretty well done and pretty interesting, and I wanted to buy it and I wanted to read it to support Frank Miller, but I would not say that this series was my cup of tea either. Elvira, Mistress of the Dark. I have to say, one of all the like complaints that I have about like pros on Twitter and how bad they are, Elvira gets credit from me for like coming back in like a big way this year. I hadn't seen or thought about Elvira very much, but her Twitter presence is amazing. And then the rest of this box is Alterna Comics, stuff that I bought from Alterna, Tinseltown, and Peter Samedi, who runs Alterna Comics. This guy? This guy is really like a saint. I think he's done his best this year to reach out to fans, to try to stay neutral on this whole like Comicsgate debate. And still, despite his attempt to stay neutral and to like encourage new readers, he has been attacked. Attacked for thanking people for buying the books, attacked for retweeting people who tweeted "Move the Needle." There's active campaign against anybody. They don't want they didn't want people showing that supporters of diversity in comics or people that use this hashtag "Move the Needle" were like actually buying comic books. It destructed their narrative that these are a bunch of people like living in their basement who don't actually read comics, who are just like throwing stones because they're mad about Trump, you know. I have to say one thing I'll criticize Alterna Comics for. They have a wide variety of books, and a lot of these books I was not into. I cannot say that I enjoyed the Sphere Diaries book. But I did enjoy Zero Jumper. That was probably like my favorite one that I read of all the alternative comics books. And I only have like the first 2 of that. Mr. Crip, I'm gonna give Mr. Crypt to my kids and see if they like it. But I was not a fan of Mr. Crypt either. So I'm gonna Scrimshaw was pretty good. Cyborgs, pirates, cutthroats, and mercs. Just to like skip back a little bit further. This is a long year-end roundup. I might go for a whole hour on this. This is 34 minutes, and I'm only 2 boxes in. Lilith Dark. That was another one that was, not. I didn't really feel like that one was for me, but that happens a lot, and I appreciate this guy for his professionalism, but also for all his hard work. He's a one-man band, like producing all these books. So then you finally get to Amazing Age, and this is like the most disgusting, one of the more disgusting things that I saw happen this year, where the guys, Samedi published this book, Amazing Age, and I guess it was the guy Massey, who created this book, like came out and disavowed Samedi, disavowed like the publisher who published his work. And I can't understand why you would disavow him, like publicly, and break that relationship. The only reason is somebody must have been telling him from like the mainstream. You've got to distance yourself from Peter. You've got to distance yourself from Alterna. They're related to Comicsgate. They're related to alt-right. I mean, Samedi is like half Italian, half Chinese guy who lives in New Hampshire. Like I watch him on YouTube. He's the nicest guy you could ever imagine. I don't understand. Like, comic book industry, what are you doing? I don't understand why you're making your creators behave in this way. The other thing that's interesting about Samedi, and this is Samedi's book, The Chair. Like, he did this one. You see his name over there. And he also made a movie. It was apparently Roddy Piper's last movie, like an animated movie where Piper does the voice. Piper also has a G.I. Joe action figure that came out in conventions, by the way. This is like clearly an homage cover. Samedi has said that his. So every time he was attacked, a lot of these disenfranchised comic book fans would come out and buy more titles. That's partly why I bought so many titles. Partly because I was like working on my book, Cyborg USA, and I was like, well, what do I think about this guy as like a potential publishing partner? But also because he was being attacked for no good reason, like no justifiable or legitimate reason. And I wanted to support him. I wanted to support the poor guy, and a lot of other people were doing it too. And what he said, and he's had a lot of problems with Diamond distribution too, where he's kind of getting these ridiculous fines, and problems like they mislabeled one of his books. Was supposed to come out as a number 1. They put it in as a number 4, like just like on their own. Here's Doppelganger, which is like another series. We're almost at the end, and so he says that his sales to stores are down about 8%. And that is apparently in line with the entire comic book industry. But from last year, his direct sales to customers are up. I can't believe if this is the right number. I'm doing this off my memory, but it sounds like he said 1,750%. That's almost like a 20 times increase, and a lot of that stuff is the like slingshot effect of people like criticizing him or demonizing his company, like fans saying like, that's not true, that's not what's going on with this guy, like you guys are making a false or disingenuous argument, and we're going to support him. And it's just another indicator of like how crazy in comics this year has been. So, when I talked about like when I was a big collector in the 90s, that was the prime time of the Infinity Gauntlet and the Infinity Wars. So I was like mildly interested to start this up. But the guy drawing a lot of these Infinity Wars, Mike Deodato, was also like, I don't know if he was told to, but just kind of out of the blue, like came up with like a denunciation of Comicsgate. And it's like, again, like I'm going to say Comicsgate. Comicsgate like Comicsgate is just a word, and it means like a lot of different things to a lot of different people. And to some people, Comicsgate means diversity in comics, but he never like really embraced Comicsgate as like a thing. To some people, it means Ethan Van Sciver. To some people, it means like Trump, you know, and it's ridiculous. But you have all these pros like over the course of this year on social media that have felt, you know, whether it's like Bill Sienkiewicz or you know, Scott Snyder, they've been told to, or they apparently like have on their own just had the impulse to come out and they like release these like similar messages where it's like, you know, I'm sorry that until now I haven't come out and denounced Comicsgate. You know, Comicsgate, like I think the most truthful description of it is it's basically a customer movement of comic book fans who were tired of being treated negatively by pros on social media, and they were tired of like political propaganda or like a decreased quality of like writing and art in comics, some of which was attributable to that. Now there have been these sort of corollaries to it, where it's like, well, why is this stuff happening? Why are progressive politics finding their way into comics? Like what are these, like, you know, are there identity politics or diversity considerations that are driving this? That I think has led to this sort of inflated notion that that Comicsgate is like against women or against like minorities in comics. You know, I think you see with guys like Brian Edward Hill and Blake Northcott that that's not the case. That you know, like Hill's a black guy, you know, Northcott's a woman, and the same fans that are criticized as Comicsgate, like love those two. Love those two because they're great on social media, and their work has been, like, by and large, pretty great. But Brian Hill just announced that he's out of comics this next year. And I suspect Northcott's going to, you know, she just released a book that was crowdfunded. I suspect she's going to be trying to, like, elevate to the next level, too. A lot of people see, like, comics as a stepping stone for getting into film and TV. I will say I've been a little bit in film and TV. Just so you know, I am looking at my comic, Cyborg USA, as a stepping stone to doing more comic books. So here we have the Avengers. So I dug into this Avengers series. Again, it was another book that was well reviewed by Diversity in Comics, and I thought, all right, I'll go buy it. And I'll go buy, like, the run of, like, a couple comics before and after it. And I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it okay. It wasn't something I loved, but it was fine. And this is like a Weapon X run. Again, I bought because of Diversity in Comics recommendation. I did like these a little bit more than I thought I would. I stopped here. This was not. This is like another thing that I didn't really love in the '90s. Like, there was a lot of like Sabretooth and Wolverine fights, and that was not my favorite part of the X-Men. I picked up this Deadpool book. One thing I don't love about Deadpool, and I think that this is like kind of a trend in comics that's like not positive, this sort of like snarky fourth wall breaking character. I never really liked it because there's a lot of fourth wall breaking in like classic Marvel, you know, through like the Silver and Bronze Age. And all that stuff is like a lot more interesting and a lot funnier to me when it's kind of like used sparingly. To have a whole character who pushes it is not my favorite. So I picked up Exiles 2. This is another thing I wanted to make a point about. There are a lot of writers. Excuse me. There are a lot of writers and artists who were criticized heavily by like figures in comics. One of them is like Saladin Ahmed, and he wrote the first Exiles. But I would like consciously try to like pick up the books that they were writing, like people who are criticized, and give them a chance. This is another one, Domino. I really like this cover. This is a good cover. This is Gail Simone. Gail Simone, I think, has been like one of the most egregious offenders against the fans. You know, she came to prominence in comics. It's really interesting. Like almost as a as like a Comicsgate type critic, and her like, her big critique is that, too many women are like, her thing was like women in fridges. Too many women are being, there's the Kyle Rayner girlfriend who was like, he found her stuffed in a fridge and killed, being murdered or, injured, as like a motivating tool for like the man. I think that's the same kind of criticism in like stories when it's like, the woman gets raped and it's only the purpose of it is like to motivate the man to take action. And I think that that's fair criticism. I don't think that that's like the best thing, but I also don't think it's like something that necessary. It's like a trope. Any trope like is only effective as much as it is like surprising. And once it becomes a trope, it's not as interesting. And if it's a trope that's like politically insensitive, it kind of has a double strike against it. I'm gonna tell you another trope is like pictures of dogs. So the thing that really like, I thought this was a terrible comic, great cover notwithstanding. The first page is like a splash page of a dog looking at you, and that just like the trope of like cute puppies and superheroes sitting around eating and talking about food. That's Marvel as a lifestyle brand, and you guys can have that. If that's the direction you want Marvel to go in, it's not for me. The wedding special, we had a lot of like crazy wedding things in comics this year. Mr. and Mrs. X, I bought the first one. I've got the other series of Rogue and Gambit. Here in another box, Hunt for Wolverine. This was like a big event that, man, I just was not interested in. And this was a pretty good one-off. This is a good story about Venom. I don't love Venom, but I would like recommend this particular issue. This I would not recommend. I was kind of interested to start this new Punisher book. I bought this before Diversity in Comics review. You can see it. It was not for me. This was like pretty good, I guess. Ta-Nehisi Coates' Black Panther. I don't know. The Black Panther thing was like pretty interesting. This one I thought was great. I did really enjoy this book, The Sun and the Fury. This came out when Black Panther came out, and I would definitely recommend that one. Tony Stark's Iron Man. This one, I tried to give like all the Marvel titles like a little consideration. I think this was the last one with, did they call her Thordis? Maybe they didn't. But that's the death of the Jane Foster Thor. Yeah, so. Jessica Jones, the last like Brian Michael Bendis book. People complain about Brian Michael Bendis. I haven't read like a lot of Brian Michael Bendis, but I did not like that book. This Moon Knight, Max Bemis was like kind of a famous antagonist of Comicsgate this year. He described to many of them on Twitter that he would like them to eat his ASS, which like okay guys, like you want to decide that half of all comic book fans are your enemies, and you're going to come up with the nastiest, like most mean-spirited like burn that you can come up against them. Like, go for it. That's great. But you're not helping comics. You're not helping the industry, and you're just making yourself look like clowns. This one was okay. It was not so much for me. And then this one too. I like the style. This is another Saladin Ahmed. I like the art style, but this is the only one I bought of that series, and it was like, it's like the Hulk before it. Not that interested. Here's another Donny Cates, Death of the Inhumans. This was well recommended, but again, not that crazy about. This one is like really interesting because this is some of the Mark Waid Captain America run, and this came after the Nick Spencer like turning him into a Nazi Hydra run, and I bought these again because like even in the middle of the conflict between Mark Waid and Diversity in Comics, Diversity in Comics was recommending his books. And when I remember when I bought these were like some of the first Move the Needle books I was buying. And there's the big, what is this, issue 700. I bought these thinking like, I'm gonna show these guys like they're like they think Diversity in Comics is like a bad guy, but he's out there recommending their books, like reading their books, reviewing them, and sure he says some saucy things sometimes and is like giving them a hard time about their work, but I'm going to buy it. I'm going to buy it to support his reviews. I'm going to buy it to support the creators and support the characters, support Captain America, who I truly love, who I truly think is like, one of my favorite characters in comics. But it was short-lived because Mark decided that the best choice for him would be to get involved between Anarchic Press and Diversity in Comics contract to publish Jawbreakers, and now we are where we are today. Like, he's not better for it. The comics industry isn't better for it. It is a shame, like a dirty shame. So here we go. This is like the annual of the Marvel 2-in-1. This series was like a real heartbreaker for me, this Marvel 2-in-1 thing in Human Torch, because I also really like the Fantastic Four. And I wanted to read some good Fantastic Four stories this year. And the first couple of issues of 2-in-1 I thought were fantastic, like really fabulous. And then just the quality of the art and the quality of the story and the writing, I thought just like deteriorated like over the run. And I just got burned out on it. I was like, I'm very disappointed with how this all unfolded. It took too long to unfold, and there was just like a lot of nonsense that I didn't think like really served what was going on in the first two issues, which was like classic villains doing great classic villain stuff and classic, Johnny Blaze, Ben Grimm character dynamics. This was a great book too, though. This is a Silver Surfer annual. It's a great like self-contained story. I would recommend this one to anybody that wanted to buy a Marvel book. And then, the Fantastic Four came back. I didn't buy the first one because I found out that the Fantastic Four weren't actually in it, and I was not that crazy about it beyond that. When I was in the 90s, one of the other books that I was like a heavy reader of was Daredevil. So I was kind of happy to get into Daredevil. This Mare Fisk storyline, though, is like really, really spotty. I think this one's a really good one. I can't remember exactly which one it is, but there's like one that's like really action-packed. Not crazy about like that villain, and just the whole story of Matt Murdock becoming the deputy mayor was like ultimately like felt just kind of contrived, and there's a lot of stuff about it that was not super fun. But in it there were a couple of fun, like, great issues. So Daredevil. The hard thing about Daredevil is I like Daredevil so much as a character. He's like one of those guys that I'll just keep buying Daredevil, and I'll hope to find a good one. But it can be like really hit or miss to me. And then here we go. So this is what Donny Cates like. Donny Cates said that he's written 80 issues of comic books this year, so he might have needed to slow down a little bit, but he was really hitting his stride on this one. This, of course, created the new character Cosmic Ghost Rider, who Ghost Rider is like one of, if not my like number one favorite comic book character. And it was really fun. The Cosmic Ghost Rider, who's like running around with Thanos in this series, it's like a really fun character, and it was really fun before you knew who he was. Once you found out who he was, I felt like it was a little bit less fun. But it was still okay. I was like still like more or less on board with it. And what was really great about this Thanos Wins series, it ended up being less about the Cosmic Ghost Rider and more about the dynamic between old Thanos and like young Thanos. And I thought that was really good. I mean, say whatever you want about Donny Cates or be mad at him, for coming out against Comicsgate. He really nailed Thanos Wins, and that's like probably going to be like a classic for all time. This, however, is not, in my opinion, a classic for all time. I don't know what, again, like I love Ghost Rider. I don't know what you think about Cosmic Ghost Rider, but man, I thought that was silly. It was just too silly and too hard to swallow. By the second issue, I was so fed up with it. I was like, just done. I never wanted to read another Cosmic Ghost Rider story again. And then here's the What If metal Ghost Rider. You know, I like the Robbie Reyes Charger Ghost Rider version. So the rest of this gets into like Damnation, and Damnation. Some of this is like okay. This is like another one where Chris Sabila has been like very anti-Comicsgate, but that was one that was reviewed positively by Diversity in Comics. That was one he suggested as a move the needle one, and it's like so disgusting to me, the way that people. I mean, I can see why like people don't like Diversity in Comics, and I know he said some stuff that really rubs people the wrong way, but I also think that he was really trying to help save comics. He was really trying to help like increase the sales and improve the quality of work coming out of the industry. And it just at every turn it was crapped on, like absolutely crapped on. And consequently, so were his fans. The guy has 90,000 people watching his videos on YouTube. A lot of those people are, you know, like me, like I wouldn't consider myself a lapsed comic fan because I was still buying a lot of stuff. You know, trades of G.I. Joe from IDW and trades of Batman. But I wasn't buying like floppies every week. And he was getting people back in the stores to buy floppies. I liked this series, Damnation, the primary series. I thought that was really good. Really enjoyed it. This is like another Donny Cates thing that I thought he did reasonably well. I made a mistake. I accidentally bought a couple of these issues. I bought twice because I ordered them as back issues and then they didn't come, and I ordered them again. But I didn't like. I was not that into the crossovers. So the Scarlet Spider and the Doctor Strange, the Iron Fist issues. I collected them all. Like you see, I kind of collected them double accidentally. Some of them were okay. I didn't like the Ghost Dog. I'm kind of over like cutesy dogs in comic books. And then that's kind of it. So like, you know, what I would say is like Damnation. Go pick up Damnation. Go pick up maybe pick up the Ghost Rider one. You know, pick up the main series. You don't necessarily need the crossovers. And I would essentially say the same thing with this. Dark Knight's Metal. This was one that was not like reviewed very highly by Diversity in Comics, but it was very prominent when I started buying comics at the end of last year. And Scott Snyder, you know, I felt like I had a good experience reading a lot of his Batman trades. Also Greg Capullo, I wanted to support him because I think he's like a really, really great guy. So I went out and I bought all these Dark Knight Metals. This is what I bought all year. All the Dark Knight Metals. Like box is packed a little tight, so let's see what we can get through here. Pop this first bunch out so I can flip through them a little bit better. And I think that's pretty much the end of what's in this box. It's like the rest of this you know, is the number 6. And then I bought the you know, the crossovers too. Bats Out of Hell was a 1 4-parter, and then the other 4-parter was Gotham Resistance. You know, they were okay. I went out of my way to track them down. I overpaid for them, and I probably in hindsight like wouldn't necessarily have done it again. And then there's Wild Hunt. I think the series overall, like, it started really strong for me. It was kind of a letdown as it got to the end. But I did like the idea of those like Batmans from all the like dark universes. You know, the kind of like dark side of the Justice League. I really enjoyed that aspect of it. I thought it was a clever and interesting approach. So, you know, I've got all these. Again, this is like all the stuff I bought this year. I was really trying to help DC. I was really trying to like support Marvel. Kind of let like good quality work like be rewarded with my patronage. But at every step of the way, I felt like, you know, like the industry didn't want to be supported. You know, wanted to antagonize the fandom. mostly because they didn't want to be criticized. And they're like looking to like draw in this like, I don't know, like phantom audience, as sometimes is described. So from Dark Knight's Metal, I transitioned into the new Age of Heroes, and I gave all these titles a shot. I gave Silencer a shot. I thought Silencer was probably like one of the better ones of it, of the new age. I also like the Terrifics, but one thing that really killed this new age of heroes was like every one of these creators came out, like condemning Comicsgate, condemning the fans, whether it was like this guy Jordan, like block-botted me. Like I guess I was block-botted because I don't know, I followed Ethan Van Sciver or Diversity in Comics on Twitter. Silencer I ended up giving up because like, Patch Zercher, I thought he would like have this period where he would say some like pretty sensible stuff on Twitter. I would retweet him, and then like within a day or so, it would seem like people like got on his case and said, you gotta, you're saying the same kind of stuff that Comicsgate people are saying. You got to get out there and distance yourself from Comicsgate, so you don't hurt your career. I mean, that's like really what it felt like was happening, and I don't know if that's what was happening or not. But guys, if that's what you're doing, you got to cut it out. I'm talking to you, Joe Quesada. I'm talking to you, Gail Simone. I'm talking to you, DC Comics. So, this was another one like Lemire and the Terrifics. I like this kind of because I was like hankering for a Fantastic Four, and I thought that they, it's obvious what they're doing to sort of like create these are all like kind of DC versions of Marvel characters. Like, okay, that's cute. But I genuinely did like the Terrifics. I just kind of got out of it because I got frustrated with the creators. Uh-oh. Sounds like that was if that beep keeps going, we're gonna have to stop this video. I'm gonna have to hustle up. So there you go. That's like that. I'll put those back in a minute. I got 2 more boxes of these. This is all stuff I bought this year, all stuff I read. There's another box of stuff like back at my apartment. But it's like, this is another thing like Peter Tomasi. Oh no, it's a real shame because he was doing such a great job on Superman. Like really terrific stuff. Every Peter Tomasi book that I read, Superman or Super Sons, I really enjoyed. And they kind of busted him out so that they could bring in Bendis. And it's kind of too bad because it seems like people have not been as crazy about Bendis' stuff. I guess this is a little bit out of order. I bought 2 of these. This is Goodnight Moon, the Goodnight Moon Superman issue. I bought one for my son. Really good stuff. Classic Superman stuff. Great work. And then there's, all leading up to Action Comics number 1000. Here's a section of Hal Jordan and the Green Lantern. This is this was like when Ethan Van Sciver was still working on it, before he got drummed out. Man, I know what that is. That beeping is my carbon monoxide detector downstairs. It's on its last legs. I didn't expect it to start beeping right in the middle of this video. In the middle? Let's say an hour into this video. But we can flip through this pretty much. Tinian had a pretty good run on Batman Detective Comics, and I went back and like followed up like on his. I like Tim Drake. Tim Drake came out in the 90s, and I liked him quite a bit. I liked what that Tinian gave him. Kind of a cool little arc. And then after this, like after Tinian's run on, I also like Tinian. I'm just gonna say on the Batman versus Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles series with IDW. I felt like he was able to really give like all those characters, the Batman characters and the TMNT characters, like a great kind of like. Each of them like really got their due. Like they got great character moments and were characterized really, really well. Along with that, and then you get into the Brian Edward Hills run, and that was also I felt like a pretty great run. Like he definitely deserves credit for Detective Comics. I'm excited that he got a chance to write it. This like this new villain that he created, and the dynamic the Batman had with Black Lightning, and all these like friends. I'm gonna close this door and see if I can get that thing not bothering me. You could hear he talked about like what he set out to do with this run, and I felt like he accomplished it really well. The use of Black Lightning, and the choice of the characters that he used. It's a great arc, and that guy like definitely deserves his due. He put in a lot of good work this year. I gave the regular Batman line a chance for a while. I was some of them were okay. I was not like that crazy about it overall. This is Tom King's run on Batman, and I quit right before the big issue 50 event. That was that was kind of a mess. I think a lot of people, like a lot of retailers, were upset that they kind of spoiled that one. But by the time it came out, I had a couple of the weddings previews, and I realized that it was not going to be like for me. Nightwing, I'm going to give like Nightwing a lot of credit. I haven't read the last couple, where Dick gets shot and I guess he becomes Rick. I still have a couple of those like backed up, but I think Nightwing is like a really quality book. And I didn't love like all the Nightwings I read this year, but it was like kind of consistently enjoyable. I think same thing about Deathstroke. This is Priest. His run on Deathstroke, he was very excited to have an opportunity to write this character. I think Comicsgate made a lot of like his complaints that he after years of writing like all kinds of titles, he was like pigeonholed into writing black characters, and he took a step away from comics because he felt like I shouldn't just like have to write black characters. I can write any character, and so they offered him Deathstroke, and the first thing he said was he black? They're like, no, and he's like, all right, let's take a look at it. Some Suicide Squads. Suicide Squad is not exactly like my book, but I love Batman. Who doesn't love Batman? Most people do. I also love the Flash. I mean, I really do love the Justice League, but Batman and Flash. I love the Rogues Galleries, and I'm definitely interested in like giving these guys a shot when I can. Flash. I bought a bunch of Flashes this year. Flash disappointed me a bit. I loved having the original Wally West back, and I loved everything associated with that. When it came to the Flash War, though, I felt like a lot of the conflict between Barry and Wally was really shoehorned, like kind of out of left field, and you just ended up with like there was like one issue in particular where it was just like roided out Barry and roided out Wally like yelling at each other, and it just didn't feel like didn't feel right to me. It was me giving Aquaman. I know that I don't really like give Aquaman his due, or respect that as a book as much. I'm just like not that interested in it. But every time I like see Aquaman stuff, I'm really impressed with it. This is another one where it's like I only bought the first one, but this was like really impressive. The art was really impressive, and well worth it. And then there's the wedding. I do want to give. I know I'm gonna get up on this like Titans #1. I do want to give credit. I didn't love this one, but I buy most of my comics at Midtown Comics in Manhattan, and there's like a clerk. They were sold out of the Titan special, but she had like one in her own. She like had bought two or grabbed two for her own pull list, and she grabbed one out to give it to me. And I was just like really touched by that. I was really impressed that she would do that. I told her she didn't have to, but she was like, no, it's okay. And I really appreciated that. That's the kind of like customer service that that you do like you still get at like most of these comic book stores, even like Midtown Comics, the big one in Manhattan, and people like, you know, it's like really important to support these like local comic book stores. Like, you know, a lot of these guys are like kids that are working in it. They're working really hard, and they're all passionate. They all love comics, and it's a shame to see like so many of these stores go out of business. You know, this is just to show that like I was with Scott Snyder for a while. Scott Snyder, I saw that he had donated to Mark Waid's Legal Defense Fund. I don't know if that's like later the donation, like I saw that he had donated and then later the donation was not there anymore. I don't know if he pulled it or whatever, but that was another one that kind of left like a bad taste in my mouth. I'd been buying like all his books. There's another Tinian, Justice League Dark, you know, and all the kind of like evolution of Justice League and you know, the main DC heroes, and you know, just like disappointing. You know, like I understand if you like if the industry is like putting pressure on you to support Waid or putting pressure on you to like distance yourself from diversity in comics, but it's just too like repulsive. The idea that you're like, I've seen so many pros this year who like come out and said like if you associate yourself with Comicsgate, or you like diversity in comics, or you support Ethan Van Sciver, or you'll never work in comics. We're never gonna, you know, you're never gonna, just like the shame and the fear and the hate, like wrapped up in that sentiment, I find like so repulsive and so necessary to fight back against. I have to say that it's like a big part of why I'm making this video, because like like I don't want to like I'm not trying to build my channel into like a big regular channel, but I do want to like talk about my experiences with comics this year, like what led me to produce my own comic, and just kind of my observation like through these experiences. This is like priest. I really like this. This was like this. Apparently, this character, the Red Lion, was he's like this kind of African like warlord, and he was created to kind of give the finger back to Marvel for like only wanting to hire him for a Black Panther book. There were a couple. I don't know if you saw, like there were a couple older Justice League books in here. I went back and bought. Yeah, here's one. How do you like that Magic Mike cover? Because Jason Fabok and like his work, I really like the button. This, even though there's a lot of stuff I bought this year, there's some other stuff upstairs that are like some trades. I bought Tom King's The Vision, and I still haven't read that because I kind of got tired of reading Tom King stuff. But like Fabok's The Button, I love the art, and I met that guy at New York Comic Con this year. Some more. This is Hawkman. I love this Hawkman series. I think everybody should be reading that, especially like I hear number 7 is like a great origin story. You know, they tie together, like Hawkman has a bunch of diverse origins. They tie together his origin in that book. I'd like to read it again. Like I took a break from buying stuff because of my negative attitude about what's been going on. But if I go back and buy stuff, that would be one that I would pick up. This Batwoman is like, okay. I think this was the last, might have been the last one in the run. And then like an older Swamp Thing I picked up just because I like these characters. Like Zatanna and the Spectre. And then Raven, I bought the first couple Ravens to support my man Wolfman. I also met him at New York Comic Con this year. Catwoman. These are the Bendis Man of Steels. I made it like 3 issues before I kind of got sick of it. Trinity, like this is another one. I bought this like kind of to support Patch Zerker. But then he like blocked me. He like, after I like was like retweeting him and supporting like some of the things he was saying, I got blocked, I guess, because I've been you know, identified as Comicsgate adjacent or whatever. And then, so, you know, I also bought like the Dan Slott comics. Dan Slott and his like back and forth with Doug Ernst, who's like a conservative, like I guess you'd call him a reporter, sort of like a reporter. No, maybe not like a real reporter. Like their like back and forths have been like pretty well chronicled. I think some of that like kicked a lot of this Comicsgate stuff off, but by all like regards, Dan Slott's like a pretty great guy. I know he just said he was the guest monologist at ASCAT, which is the UCB improv show, a couple weeks ago. I used to be a performer at the Upright Citizens Brigade Theater. Not having, not reportedly not having its best times. This is a pretty good one too. This is like one of the ones where like Diversity in Comics was criticizing Chip Zdarsky for a long time for like general goofiness in his writing. But this is like a great story where Spider-Man, reveals that he's Peter Parker, and it's like the way that their relationship kind of unfolds over the next few issues is like pretty interesting. That's two of the same copy, but I didn't stick with the series very long. There we go. Kind of caught up on the last one, and then this is the last box. Can you believe it? It's an hour and 15 minutes, and the last box of stuff that I bought this year. Rogue and Gambit. This was like a pretty good series. It kind of went on too long. It was a little repetitive, but that was kind of the point. They were kind of existing in this like at this like summer like resort where they were like waking up and not realizing that they had already kind of been through stuff again. But then there was like kind of a goofy thing that happened on the last page of the last issue that was kind of annoying. Still, like, maybe not hold it against the whole series. The Phoenix Resurrection series was kind of funny because this was like one of the first Move the Needle like chunks of comics that I bought, and I posted it on Move the Needle on Twitter, and like my post ended up being the subject of like the BuzzFeed hit piece where BuzzFeed kind of did like a half-hearted job of like condemning. You could tell they were put up to like condemning Comicsgate as like a hate group, but the evidence wasn't really supporting it. I think if you go back and read the Daily Beast article and the BuzzFeed article and the Washington Post article about Comicsgate, and you have any like media or like reporting like literacy at all, you can see that they don't really back up the claims that they were making. And so like my post for Move the Needle was like, it was like the Phoenix Resurrection series, and it was like, I bought these, and they were like, in the same article, they're like, the Comicsgate people and Move the Needle are condemning like women as lead characters of the books, and then here's a picture of me saying, hey, I support Move the Needle. Here's here's Jean Grey on the cover of the book. So it's like just like the incongruousness of it makes like the lies transparent. I kind of like this series. I got Mystery and Mad Rapport. I bought the whole run of this. I liked the women X-Men, like kind of on the hunt for Wolverine. Kind of liked how that played out. And then the Shield, like the reprint. And I guess this was like a Shield series that they like collected, like never got released. I like that. All right. Then, geez, we're almost done with this. Then I get to Bane Conquest. Bane Conquest was one of my favorite series of the year. Chuck Dixon wrote this. Chuck Dixon is also a persona non grata in comics anymore, despite like his classic contributions, especially to DC, especially creating Bane. This was like another one. I accidentally bought 2, 7 and 8. I got kind of hosed on that one. But I love this run. I love the art, this Graham Nolan art. Just like that series, like really characters, like so fun because being in and out of other people's consciousnesses, and so it's like very orienting. Also, there was no commitment to like a narrative thread. So things happened. And there was a progression of events, but there's a lot of loose threads hanging and a lot of just like general goofiness. But the compositions on every page and the entertainment value of every page was on point. Punisher the Platoon. This was a darn decent kind of Vietnam era Punisher origin story by Garth Ennis. Like well worth it. Kind of getting into the like end of last year. These ones I went back. This is like the Jack Kirby like special. I went back to buy these partly because of Mr. Miracle. I also bought the Kirby like New Gods omnibus this year. And Mr. Miracle was like this was like another one where it was like highly recommended by Diversity in Comics. I read these. I was on board with them for a while, and then just like I accidentally bought two of these, right? The bottom just like dropped out of the series. It just ended up being such a slog that by the end of it, I didn't even get the last issue. I got to issue 11, and that was the end of it. Looks like I'm almost out of batteries. This one, I want to give a shout out here, though, because I know I've been bad-mouthing Tom King a little bit. I love this, and this is another Jason Fabok. This is the Swamp Thing Winter Special. You know, now we're getting into, like, the end of last year books. Even this is, like, an end-of-the-year roundup. That was great. I guess I put some of the ones I like more in this box, because this is also the Batman White Knight run. You know, more or less eagerly looking forward to Sean Murphy, like, picking up this series. It was you know, it was well done, well entertaining, and anybody who like didn't love like all the Batmobiles in action like needs to like turn in your comic book fandom card. I also like this. I know some people weren't that into it. I like the Signal as the new character. I thought it was kind of interesting to have like a daytime crime fighter with these like powers working with Batman. I was sort of into that. This guy Gage, you know, he had a good run on some of the G.I. Joe books that I like. This is like it's kind of an interesting book between him and Deadshot called Sins of the Father, where they're kind of hashing out some dad issues. I thought it was pretty good. It was pretty good. A little bit like out of step with like the Will Smith Deadshot, but you know that's something comics has to grapple with, like characterizing you know, they're like longtime legacy characters when they're portrayed differently in film. And then this is not this year either, but I went back and bought this Cape Carson, the Cybernetic Eye, because of the Tom Scioli Superpowers backup. I was very interested in reading that, and that definitely delivered. It was definitely worth it. Cape Carson was not. I did not care for that. And then these crossovers, Hanna-Barbera and DC Comics, Flash, Speed Buggy. This was like a pretty good one. This is another Brian Edward Hill one, but the backup in this is like there's like a second story that's so terrible in this book it like really leaves a bad taste in your mouth. Okay, and then we just kind of get into trades, and this is like, you know, I threw this like back here. These are ones I actually bought last like couple years ago, so we're gonna say they don't count, but they used to be on my bookshelf. I pulled Scott Snyder off my bookshelf because I guess I was just kind of fed up with him, and I had to make some room for some stuff I was more excited about. But just so you know, I bought all his stuff. This one's kind of funny too. I bought this year because this is Gail Simone and Ethan Van Sciver's collaboration on Firestorm, and if you want to look at like where comics went wrong, where the divide in comics happened, like why we're in this terrible place, I would read this book because there are a lot of clues in this book. Here's like a Richard Meyer, Diversity in Comics. I went back and picked up this. This is actually not that bad. I enjoyed it. He's like sort of a Korean war expert, and I like war stuff. This is Karen Travis, I guess. Like her G.I. Joe IDW series that was cut short, The Fall of G.I. Joe. this one, the one thing annoying about this one is these pages fell out of the book on me. So thanks a lot, IDW. Your binding was not working. And this is another one I picked up, autographed by Ethan Van Sciver this year. I'm really excited about the Three Jokers storyline, as I mentioned, with Fabok. It's like an old one. All these are like older books. I bought this one this year. Didn't like it. I don't know. These are just more trades. Batman Venom. That I've had that for a long time. Batman 66. You know, these are like kind of, you know, give them a shot if you're interested in them. They're kind of hit and miss. I accidentally bought two of these too. These ones, this book I did not like. I know a lot of people enjoyed that War of Jokes and Riddles. I was kind of underwhelmed by it. There's another Ethan Van Sciver book I picked up to support him when he was being defamed as a Nazi. An extra Infinite Crisis I have ended up in this box. And then, yeah, I went back and bought this Tinian book because I was interested in his portrayal of Tim Drake. And that's it. We made it through all the books. It says 85 minutes. Holy smokes. Nobody's ever going to watch this video, I reckon. But if you do, you're gonna see a lot of books bought this year, and you're gonna see a lot of opinions about them, and a little bit of editorializing about what's been wrong with comics. There's my guy; he's running around going crazy. I gotta attend to him. So thanks for watching. Let's make 2019 better, guys. Let's put our differences aside, and let's remember our shared love of comics, and let's just try to do our best to be kind to people, and to accept criticism, and to find ways to bring more people into the fold, and not find ways to exclude them or shame them, or ban them from ever working ever again. You know what I mean? America is better than that. Comic books are better than that, and I know in this upcoming year, 2019, we can all be better than that too. Thanks so much.